welcome to the Mojo Podcast. I hope you're having a great day. It's lovely to be back here, and thank you all for the great responses to episode 1 with Ali Owen, who founded the Brixton Finishing School and has begun to change the way an industry looks at talent. This new series is all about founders, and there are some amazing conversations to come over the next few months, and today is no exception. Being a founder means embracing change, often stepping away from something in search of what your heart truly desires. And bravery, lots of bravery.
You know, bravery is about having the courage to step into something when you know and are aware of the risks or the challenges. And I think that it was a moment of bravery for both of us in different ways. But I don't think there's ever a situation where it's all perfect. And the sooner you get used to that, the better.
Ben Gallagher is the co-founder of the consultancy business B&A. He is B and his partner Andrew Missingham is A. Ben chose to walk away from what many might see as the dream job at Nike and the Nike Foundation. When he realised the next job that he really wanted didn't exist, well, he created it with Andrew, and B&A was born. We look back over the 8 years of the company's history to understand what lay the foundations for the success that they're enjoying today. Doing great work with an array of incredible clients around the world, and fundamentally solving problems for them. You'll hear about the time Ben and Andrew spent working out, were they actually right for each other? Could they be founding partners? And understand when they needed to put principle before profit and actually walked away from the very first client. We also talk about how to grow and scale a team and how to manage their pace of growth, and how to create not just a business, but indeed a movement for change. This episode is chock-a-block with examples, insight and honesty. I really hope you like it as much as I did, and if so, please do remember to rate and review over on Apple Podcasts. This simple act allows many more people to hear these Mojo stories that I'm gathering in this series. Okay, so let's dive into it. My Mojo conversation with Ben Gallagher from B&A. So welcome back to the Mojo Podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted today to have my guest Ben Gallagher, co-founder of B&A, joining me from London. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks, Richard. Nice to see you and hear you.
Yeah, isn't Zoom a wonderful thing?
Well, it's kind of changed our lives in the last couple of years. Yeah.
Hasn't it? That's a whole podcast in there separately. We might get onto remote working. We'll see. But
Right.
Ben, I wanted to check in with you and see. So, how is your mojo today? Out of 10, where would you put it?
I think I'm an 8. You know, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling full of energy. It's the new year. The weather's nice. Sun's out. And it's starting to feel like spring is easing its way towards us. So I'm a morning person. So if you ask me that question now, 10 in the morning, it's always going to be pretty high, close to a 10.
And it is interesting. I do get different numbers from people as to when we record, because it is about your mojo right now. And there you are. It's early in the morning. As you say, the seasons have got that change coming, a bit more light in your life. So a solid 8 by the sounds of it.
Yeah, definitely a solid 8, and excited for the conversation too.
Yeah, well, it's great. It's great to be here. So when I say mojo, and you mentioned energy, and obviously you talked about sunlight as well, but what comes to mind for you if I said, how would you define mojo for you, Ben?
I think it is energy. I think it is how you show up in the world, and obviously that could be in real life, that could be virtually, given the world we're in now. But I think it's the energy that you exude and that people feel coming from you. And I think that's what, for me, Mojo is all about. And there's loads of different ways, I suppose, you could explore that concept or that notion. But yeah, to put it really simply, I just think it's your energy.
And is it something when you talk about how you're showing up, is it something you're very conscious of? Whether you call it mojo or something else, as you say, are you conscious of that?
Yeah, I'm really conscious of it. And I think I've been conscious of it throughout my life, actually, not just my kind of working career. Now, as a co-founder, I think I'm very conscious of how I show up for the team as a leader, for clients that we spend time with, for partners that we work with. So there are different stakeholders, all of whom are really important, and how I suppose myself and Andrew, my co-founder, show up, I think sets the tone for their expectation of the business. So yes, I think a lot about it. I try to keep it front of mind all of the time, and have a really good sense of how I am showing up, how my energy is being received. And we do a lot of facilitation work as well. And I think as a facilitator, it's particularly important that the kind of tone you want to set for the room, your expectations of everybody else. As a facilitator, you've got to put yourselves forward first and model what you are expecting from other people.
Right, love that. So when you're stepping into a room of people, clients, they probably have a certain expectation of you, the facilitator. What, out of interest, if you're not feeling an 8 or a 9 level mojo and you step into that room, what do you do, or how do you change that up?
I think that you have to think about, in particular in facilitation, and Andrew and I discuss this a lot. He comes from a performing arts background originally, and so he's particularly good at taking stage, if you like. And one of the things I've learned from him is that really facilitation is a performance. And so if you're not feeling like an 8 or 9 in yourself that morning, you have to, I believe, kind of steel yourself to be able to perform in the moment. However, I don't think it's about pretending. I think it's also about calling it. And if as a facilitator, you're modeling behaviors you expect from other people, and one of them might be truthful honesty about how you're feeling in a given moment, then you need to say, I'm a 4 or I'm a 3 or I'm a whatever, but I'm going to bring everything that I can to this session. So there's 2 parts to it. I think one is, as you step into a facilitation situation, what can you do to adopt the performance mindset for that moment? And then the second one is actually being honest and being vulnerable to say, hey, I'm not feeling 100%, but that's where we are, because it allows then other people to step into that place as well.
Yeah, probably breathe a bit of a sigh of relief and say, hey, I'm not a 10 out of 10 either. So thank you for that.
You know, the number of times you've been around the room and people have basically, you can see them lying through their teeth about how they're feeling. And you don't want that in any situation, because of course, then you don't really get the truth from them at any point. And they're pretending, and that doesn't feel authentic or human.
So that honest mojo level leading to better outcomes for everybody by the sounds of it. So we're obviously, this series we're talking about founders. You are a co-founder of B&A with Andrew, who you've just mentioned, from a slightly different background to you. Could you just give us a little bit of the history to what brought you to this? Because everyone I'm speaking to, everyone's done something before.
Yeah.
And that previous history, that backstory, everyone's finding very interesting, and how the step was taken to creating, and in your case, B&A.
Sure, yeah. So we've been going about 8.5, 9 years. I started my career as a journalist. I was really interested and fascinated in the relationship between young people and politics, and I felt like there was this big gap between young people and then the decision makers in power. And so I went into journalism with the kind of doughy-eyed ambition to change that forever. And in all honesty, I found it quite challenging. I found parts of, in particular, political journalism particularly difficult, because it was very pessimistic. And I think as a 22-year-old, I was looking for more optimism in my life. And so I made a change and actually left the industry and did a bit of looking around to try and figure out what to do. And I found myself in advertising. And so I spent quite a long time in advertising, working as what is called a planner in that world, which is really about understanding audiences and customers, really understanding human behavior. And then from there, I decided that I wanted to try my hand at the other side of the fence and went to Nike. I was lucky enough to go to Nike, join the brand team in London in the run-up to London 2012.
Oh, wow.
Which was really fascinating, really amazing experience, and worked on Nike running in particular. And there was a big move around how to get more young people into running, because it wasn't at the time perceived as a kind of cool thing to do. So again, there was a big part of that was about human behavior. And then from there, an opportunity came up to go to the Nike Foundation, which was Nike's corporate foundation. And it was focused on a concept that they had created themselves called the Girl Effect, which was all about what happens when you invest in teenage girls in a development context and you work with them to remove some fundamental barriers to their empowerment. And it was a remarkable experience through which I was able to unite, I think, a lot of the things I was passionate about, which was human behavior and culture, social change and impact, and actually corporate or private sector innovation and thinking. And so we worked largely in sub-Saharan Africa to explore how to shift the prevailing social norms around teenage girls in some really challenging environments. And so I learned a lot. And this long and winding story really leads up to a moment where I started to look for partners in that work that I could rely on to go to Rwanda and experiment with setting up a radio station, go to Ethiopia and do a piece of economic modeling for teenage girls' income in a rural district. And I really struggled to find organizations who could do all ends of that spectrum. And I'd been introduced to a guy called Andrew Missingham previously. He'd facilitated an offsite I'd attended. And I thought, wow, maybe he's the guy. And I rang him up and it turned out that he was this fantastic, I'm going to say jack of all trades, which feels a bit unfair, but strategic, creative, maker, doer type person. And we worked together for about 3 years on loads of different projects all over the world. Eventually, I got to the point where I felt like it was time for a change. Things were changing at the Nike Foundation. Often these things are cyclical, they come in waves. And I'd been wondering throughout my life as to whether or not I wanted to set something up. My father was an entrepreneur, and so it was kind of in the blood. And I talked to Andrew, was telling me about an initiative or an idea that he had for a business. And I kind of spat out that I'd love to join him on that journey, and that was it. So the beginning was about taking the principles of what we've been doing together at the Nike Foundation in a client consultant relationship and actually turning that into a business.
Having that, that journey towards Nike, as you say, and finding this role there, which, as you say, your needs all ticked.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it, for a good period of time.
Yeah.
And as you say, yes, the need, the direction of the organization may shift and change, but that decision then to search out almost and to have that conversation with Andrew and to trust him and trust yourself. What did that take? Because then this is the act of almost stepping out and stepping away.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was really scary. But at the same time, it seemed to make a lot of sense. And part of the reason it made a lot of sense was because I'd been looking for jobs and I couldn't find anything that was as interesting as what I was doing. And so I kind of realized that actually, if I was going to have another job that was as stimulating as the one I just had, I was probably going to have to create it. And when I realized that, and Andrew and I kind of really started to talk seriously about things, we spent a lot of time talking about our expectations, both of what we would expect of each other, what we were hoping for in a business, why we were setting it up, and hours and hours of discussions. And one of the things that we did at the very beginning was we gave each other 3 telephone numbers of 3 people that we knew, and 2 of those people were going to give overly warm and positive recommendations as to our character and who we are, and one of those people was going to give some pretty challenging feedback and actually quite harsh. And the whole idea was we need to be able to see all sides of each other if we're going to do it. So we talked about the vision and the mission a lot. We talked about what we wanted. We talked about what it was going to feel like to work together. Andrew's at a different life stage to me. He's 15 years older than me, or thereabouts. And so we had to be really honest about all of these things from the beginning. He'd also set up a number of businesses in the past, and so had tons of experience of the do's and don'ts, and it was my first one, so I was coming into it in a different place.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like, as you say, you met different life stage, different backgrounds, but in that diversity, it sounds like there was a lot of that would, where 1+1 = 3,
Yeah,
perhaps. But also, and what I'm getting from that lovely thing, the telephone test, I'm going to call it, or the three people to speak to, is that there could have been, in that diversity of thinking, it could have been a really challenging partnership, I suppose. So how did you balance those two areas off?
I suppose what you have to, it's a bit like in a working relationship between two people. You don't have to agree on everything, but you do have to find agreement. And I think that accepting the rough as much as the smooth is really, really important. And of course, you have to, in yourself, decide how much you're willing to accept or what you're willing to allow for. And I think in those early days, I was excited about the possibility. So I was pretty open-minded, but not naive, I would say, it's probably the way to put it. And I think that, bravery is about having the courage to step into something when you know and are aware of the risks and or the challenges. And I think that it was a moment of bravery for both of us in different ways. But I don't think there's ever a situation where it's all perfect. And the sooner you get used to that, the better, to be honest. There will always be challenges. There will always be things that you wish you could change. And you can work very hard on all those things, but then something else will come along too. And I think being comfortable in that state of some ambiguity, some confusion, some trepidation keeps you honest and keeps you grounded.
How would you characterize kind of those early days, maybe the early years of B&A, when it was, and we'll come to bringing people into the team shortly, but it was when it was the pair of you and you'd stepped out and you'd worked, as you said, you'd done the due diligence mutually on each other, you'd accepted it, the brave step, understanding the challenges, but also with that lovely sense of this could be just wonderful. How would you characterize those early days? What happened?
It's scrappy, I think, is probably the best way of putting it. It was very interesting and it was a fantastic learning. We'd spent some time thinking about our vision, and our vision was and actually is to create a world of cultural, profitable, charitable enterprise. And by that, we mean that we wanted any organization to do the best of what those three worlds does. And that had been drawn on Andrew's experience in the arts, mine in the private sector, and both of us having kind of charitable social impact experience too. And it felt really exciting. And we trundled off into the world to sell our wares and sell this idea of becoming an organization that can be like that. And everybody said, wow, it's really interesting, but I've got this thing over here. Can you just give me a hand with it, please? And so we quite quickly realized that our product wasn't our product, it was our vision. And so we thought it was the thing that we were selling rather than actually our kind of guiding belief or ambition. And so we had a lot of knockback, to be honest. And there's two guys who, had a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm. It was difficult to land things. It was really difficult to land things in those early days. We didn't have investors or anything like that. So we just cash flowed it in terms of ourselves. And all we really needed was a desk and, a sandwich at lunchtime every day and a laptop. And that's what we did. After about 5 months, after about 4 months of getting closer and closer to landing some things, we managed to land a project with an organization that had a very interesting new concept around monetary exchange. And they were exploring what excess capacity could be, how it could be used in different ways. It was a fascinating project. Anyway, we got the project and we were so excited. And then we went along, we had some pre-meets, and then there was a kind of facilitated workshop part of the process with the team and the founder, who shall remain nameless. And we started the session, and quite quickly we realized that the founder was quite a challenging character and wasn't being very nice to his team, to be honest. Wasn't giving them space or allowing them to participate in any way. Anyway, we went for a pee at lunchtime and had a bit of a chat and came back. after lunch and said to our first and only and new client, we can't work with you if you're going to be like this, because we don't agree with the way that you're treating your team.
Wow.
And so that was that. So we left that day and requested that he pay for our time thus far, which he obviously didn't. And off into the world we went again. But it was the best decision we made. It was the best, firstly, because it demonstrated that Andrew and I were in solidarity with each other.
Yes.
Our values were aligned. And secondly, that we were sticking to them from the beginning. And it's made saying no to projects over the years at the right moments much easier, because we know we'll always be all right.
Wow.
So the beginning was bumpy, but we got there in the end.
Yeah, but what a moment to reflect back on, to just, as you say, to have that common purpose between you, and this, anyone that stepped out by themselves and they're running their own thing, that first client, oh yes, we've got that first client, this is going to be wonderful, and to have to call it that early and say no, and that, the classic. I'm gonna say this quote a lot, I think, on this series, but a principle isn't a principle until it costs you some money, and there you go. You're putting your principles absolutely ahead of the cash flow. But I imagine that put you in a stronger position as a duo, as a pair.
I think so, definitely. Yeah, I think we learned a lot about each other in that moment, having the guts to make the call, to stand by each other on it, and to have the optimism and the ambition to keep going. And actually, like all of these kinds of stories, then things started to click and started to happen. Maybe serendipity plays a role in that. But it was a really important moment for us, now that we think back to the early days.
And then how did scaling start to happen for B&A? When you went from, obviously, clients started coming on board, and I guess you both were doing the work. Yeah. When was the point where, we've got too much work for the pair of us, we're going to need to bring in some help here, some employees? How did that look?
So we started to get a few projects, and then we actually were asked to do a piece of work for the Nike Foundation in Ethiopia. And we'd worked with somebody in our previous lives who had been involved with the Nike Foundation through another agency, Tamika. And it was instantly obvious to us that we needed Tamika involved in this piece of work. She's a kind of super dynamic, very talented young woman who we'd had experience working with, and we knew that we needed somebody with her skills. So initially we asked her to join us on a kind of contract basis, which was quite scary in itself, because there was we're going to have to pay somebody else as well, and are we going to be able to do it? And then it led to us asking her to join the business full time. And I think that first full-time employee commitment is really scary, because of course it comes with loads of paperwork and setting up payroll and all these things that suddenly make it all feel very official and very serious. And then I think at thresholds, you along the way, as you grow, you have a moment of fear again, but then sure enough, you kind of settle into it. And I think that one of the things that we've really tried to do is only grow at the speed at which we can hire truly excellent people. And that's actually really helped us. And so we haven't been driven by the size of the organization. We've been driven by the quality of the work, the efficiency in being able to do it, and ultimately the profitability of the business as a result. Because the profitability allows us to then reinvest that cash back into the company and create this stable foundation for the future, which in the last 2 years has been extremely helpful. And I don't think either of us have ever felt like size is the best marker of success. And so we've kept it small and designed the organization in such a way that we don't have excess in the org. And that's been really important for us.
Got it. And as you said, this is you and Andrew. You bootstrapped the business.
Yeah.
Do you have investors?
No.
So it's still both of you.
Yeah.
So these are the decisions you can absolutely make in terms of the scale is the scale that's right for the business, not right for reporting back to a holding company or a stock exchange.
Totally. And I think that at the time when we first created it, we probably would have struggled to get investment, because we were trying to create something quite different, I suppose, in the market. And I think we would have, along the way, when we've worked with certain advisors and and consultants on different parts of our business to help guide us, we've found quite often they try and force us back into the existing boxes. And I think the fear would have been that an investor would have really forced us to try and exist within a particular box. Okay. And not having them is just, it's on our heads, and that's the best place to be, really. So it's also meant that we've been very careful with our finances, because we've had to make sure that we're lean and efficient to be able to grow. And now we're at a point where we can invest in things because we have cash in the business that we believe are the right, future paths for the company. And that's really fantastic. We don't have to call upon anybody else to do that, which is, again, very liberating.
And can we just talk a little bit about that, the box that investors may have tried to put you in? Because broadly, very broadly, you're in the management consultancy space, as I understand it. But I also understand you're trying to do, and you are doing something very different to how we might classically view the management consultancies. How would you describe that difference?
There are loads of consultancies out there of lots of different shapes and sizes, and you're right, management consultancies or management consulting is a space that we've associated ourselves with quite a lot over the years. What I think I've realized is that all of those kinds of businesses have a methodology. They have a way of doing things. And largely that methodology gets deployed over and over again, maybe with some tweaking, but not a lot. Largely, especially if they're a sector specialist, you get the same answers. What we realized was that through doing the work was that actually there needs to be two components to doing great work. There's the methodology, but there's also the mindset. And the mindset is the attitude that you adopt to the work you do, and the values and the behaviors that you live by that enable you to use the methodology to its greatest potency and potential. And so at B&A, we talk about our mindset being one of curiosity, of care, of imagination, of provocation, of humanity first. And I really believe that there's a big gap in consulting around being a kind of human behavior-led consultancy business. And so from the very beginning, we've thought about our team as a team of problem solvers. And they're problem solvers that adopt a mindset and use a set of methodologies to do their work. And I feel like there's a great opportunity and a point of difference to create the category of problem solving. I don't think it's consulting. I don't think it's kind of creativity. I think it's problem solving. And that is about solving 21st century contemporary problems in ways that are appropriate for those challenges. Because I think too often there has been off-the-shelf solutions applied to these really complex, really challenging issues that organizations of all kinds face, and the answers aren't good enough. So that's really our kind of, if I'm going to bang my drum, that's our mission, is to connect and educate and embolden the problem solvers our world needs now, because we really need new ideas and we need new ways of thinking and more problem solvers in the world.
Wow. So, I mean, there's so much in there that I just love to dive into a bit more. So it sounded like it sort of came out of this, your freedom to create the business that you wanted, that you had the vision for right at the beginning. I heard some values coming out there, whether you call them that or not, but around curiosity and care, ingenuity and innovation, as you were talking about, that creates this mindset for, I guess, if the same company asked 2 or 3 different consultancies to solve the same challenge or the same brief, your approach is going to be probably fundamentally different to, you might call your competitors, because of the way you approach it.
Yes, I think so. I believe so. And the way you approach it is in every aspect. It's the nature of the relationship with the client you build. It's the ability. So problem solvers at B&A run their projects in entirety. We don't have account managers and we don't have project managers. So problem solvers are kind of entrepreneurial, strategic thinkers and doers. And so they're involved in all parts of a project, which enables them to see everything, because the findings and the truth might lie in somewhere to one side that might just get lost if it's being dealt with by somebody who's not in the meat of the project, for example. And so, yeah, I really do believe that we are able to get to the truth of the human experience in a way that very few of our competitors can and do. And time again, I'm really proud to say that our clients reference our work in that vein, and our team are really adept at getting to that truth. And a big part of the reason is because they all come from very different walks of life.
Right.
And we intentionally tried to build a team with as much inbuilt diversity in every sense of the word as we possibly can. And through that clash and through that combination of experiences and perspectives, we're able, I think, combined with the mindset and the methodology, able to get to kind of deeper truths.
Got it. So what I'm almost hearing there is a bit like when you and Andrew came together, you knew you weren't parallel thinkers. You're actually coming from things from a very different angle. It sounds like your team is deliberately built that way. Yeah. Okay, so that creates amazing thinking. Does that create challenge in the dynamic of the team? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the challenge, we quite often say that the key to this is basically the translation engine at the heart of the business, which is able to translate different people's kind of lexicon, codes, expectations to all kind of combine. Because when you've got people who come from education or sport or social justice or music, they all have different codes and they all have different expectations in terms of how they work, where they work, the work they do. And what we're trying to constantly do is bring people together to be as empathetic as they can of each other, and rally around a common kind of way of doing things that allows them to express their unique selves, but also is efficient enough to actually get the work done as well. And to add into that, we have a team in the States and a team in London or in the UK and a partner in China. And so there's a kind of global geographic challenge in terms of time zones and everything else. And we're trying to create one global business. So policies and procedures and everything being kind of uniform and consistent, obviously with local variation where necessary, but for people to feel like they're part of one company rather than the America team and the UK team, what have you. And that's a challenge too.
Yeah, and I'd love to dig into that a little bit more because I've worked in global organizations in the past, and getting that true sense of one world or one team across the world is incredibly hard to do because it often becomes a bit factional by region or by big market. So beyond it sounds like you've got some very rational things in there, like processes and approaches. Is there any other secret sauce that helps, let's say, the team's global mojo to come together and be united?
We talk a lot about, especially in our organizational culture work, about the importance of seeing the individual and being the individual. And what that is about is being able to see everybody that you work with for who they really are and being willing to show everybody who you really are. And so to see others, you need to be willing to be seen, and spending time on that, constantly spending time on that, I feel is really important. Getting to know people for who they really are, their lives they lead, the context in which they come from. That may be geographic, it may be environmental, it may be, maybe socio-political, socio-cultural. But I think a big part of it is to encourage the team to be always getting to know each other as human beings, first and foremost, and to build trust through that, so that when you get to a difficult conversation about something, there is trust to lean back on, that you can use to have challenging conversations. So that's kind of one thing. The other thing that we try to do is resource our projects so that we combine people from across geographies, and that we vary people's projects so that they're working with different combinations of colleagues over a given period of time. And so we don't have, for example, a team that only work on Nike or a team that only work on Lego. We have every client is project based, and then every problem solver will work on a suite of different projects over, let's say, the course of a year, to ensure that they're forging connections across the team and that they're growing and learning new skills and having new experiences. So I think the diversity of the people is then complemented by the diversity of the work and the diversity of the ways of working. So you kind of got to go at it from every angle.
Yeah, that brings me back to the word you used earlier and how you described it in terms of bravery. And I think you said about understanding what the challenge could be, that you're the risk that you might be taking, because certainly in a traditional agency model, the client gets the team and the team stays pretty solid, and we as the agency folk, we tend to think that's what the client wants. They want that stability of team, they know who to call on. But what you're talking about is really mixing this up. So you've got the double diversity, almost diversity of thought coming in by recruitment, and then diversity of thought by project by project by project. You're mixing people around. So that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Andrew and I felt really strongly from the moment that Tanika joined us full time that people were buying B&A. They weren't buying a senior account manager or whatever it may be called, right? And so we have a single rate for the whole team across the business that the client pays. And they are buying the mindset and the methodology of which our people live by and embody and bring their own selves to. And we help our clients to trust that our decisions about who works on their projects are informed and with the client's best interests at heart. And that's been really helpful as a relatively small business. And I think has helped to create this, again, like inbuilt diversity notion within the work we do.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like you are, values first. You are putting that forward in that this is what we believe in and this is how we are going to work. Even if sometimes that might mean, okay, we might, I don't know, make a little bit less than we could on this particular project, but we're doing it in the way that we believe. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important, and I think we think about our clients as the people that they are, not the organizations they work with. So we build our relationships with the people, and I think by committing to bringing as much integrity to the work as you possibly can, builds those deep client relationships. And you will go with them over time if you do great work and you respect them and you support them. And so that's always been the game plan, is play the long game on the relationships. And we're really, proud to say that, well over 70% of our client relationships, are recurring, and they don't recur overnight necessarily. It might be a year or 2 years, but people come back. And that's a huge testament to the team and the work they do and the relationships that they've built with people.
And now sort of coming more up to date, and we've talked a little bit about the last 2 years and the challenges of that's created generically, but maybe particularly for B&A, but clearly lots of success, lots of growth. You have scaled, you are a global business, truly global business with an amazing client base. But almost going back to, you described that first tricky client meeting that you had. Are there still challenges and times you go, wow, this is really testing our belief maybe in what we're doing because of circumstance? Maybe it's because of coronavirus. Has anything like that happened?
To some degree, I think. So earlier I mentioned that we'd taken the decision that we would reinvest any profit back into the business and create a cash-rich business.
Yeah.
And so when coronavirus happened and everything kind of ground to a halt, and pretty much everybody put everything on hold for a period of time, we were very fortunate by luck rather than by design, because we obviously didn't see coronavirus coming, but we were very fortunate to have a cash base in the business that meant that we knew that we had close to like 9 months to a year's worth of runway. And that meant that we didn't have to panic. We didn't have to panic about getting work. We didn't have to change our offer necessarily. We had to adapt it to suit changing times, but it meant that we could at least settle into the unknown with a degree of confidence that we were going to be okay for a while. And then, of course, we could put in some milestones over where we might have to make decisions about the business should we get to that point. So I think it took the sting out of things at the very beginning, which was hugely helpful because there were so many challenges to deal with. For example, you know, we were a global research business, and I think 3/4 of the team were on planes somewhere else when lockdown started happening. So there was this enormous effort just to get people home and what have you. So the cash base was massive for us. We then realized that we had to pivot how we do things because we were very in person. It was very much our style. And so, and this, I, you know, pay huge credit to Andrew and Alex in our team for pivoting all of our methodologies and our approaches. So investing very quickly in proper Zoom setups that people could either have at home or in the studio when they could go in, and being confident in the fact we were just going to have to do it digitally, and that was how it was going to be. So letting go of the past and trying to embrace a new future as quickly as possible. And then I think as things started to change and little bits of work kind of came back, we had a number of different things that were really helpful for us. One was that Nike was our biggest client pre-pandemic, and we are a huge focus for us and very important to the business. And they kind of paused 99% of what they were doing with us. And what it actually led us to have to do was to look elsewhere and to find new business in other places that perhaps we wouldn't have had the time or the headspace to do previously. So I think a bit of a blessing in disguise, actually, that Nike did put quite an extended pause on work, and it meant that we had to go find work elsewhere. And we ended up winning a lot of new clients in the first 18 months of the pandemic, not necessarily the same size of projects, but loads of new relationships we formed, which was great to see. So that was a really interesting, unexpected consequence. And then I think the last piece, which was particularly salient, was just the challenge for the team of suddenly having to work remotely. I think pre-COVID, we knew very little about each other's home lives. And I think every organization's found this, that different team members live in different contexts and different situations. And it's not as easy for everybody to be able to suddenly flip to working from home for many, many reasons. And so to go from traveling the world almost nonstop to being stuck at home, I think was really, really hard. And I think it's something that we continue to keep an eye on.
And are there particular strategies that you have in place to help the team retain, you know, I used it before, that collective mojo, because it sounds like when they're in that place, the problems they're solving are going to be of a greater magnitude, perhaps. Yes. Are there things that you're doing?
We've done quite a few things. Some have survived through and some kind of haven't, because they probably weren't as effective. We had been doing a weekly balance, which was a team check-in on how everybody was feeling in themselves, kind of pre-COVID, but it was more about bringing in inspiration and ideas. And it turned more into a kind of how is everybody kind of state mojo check-in, if you like. We tried to create, like a lot of places, moments to come together to not talk about work. So whether it was like quizzes or Friday beers and, you know, all of those kinds of things, and some to better effect than others. We've always believed that the culture of an organization is in the work, and you don't create the culture separate to the work. And so actually what it's been about is trying to enrich the work that we were able to do and focus in on it as a means to uniting people and bringing them together and creating a sense of kind of common purpose. From a leadership perspective, I think Andrew and I tried to be as open and transparent about where we were with the business as much as we could, and to kind of take people on the journey of that. But there's a real balance there between being open and honest about the challenges, whilst also giving people confidence that things are going to be okay. And I think I certainly learned that at a time of challenge, people look up to their leaders to give them, kind of assure them that things are going to turn out fine. And so that, I think, is a really interesting balance to strike. Yeah. And now, we're kind of on a hybrid working. That's the way we're doing things. In the US, people moved to different cities during the pandemic for different reasons, and that was totally cool. So we don't only have a Portland base now, we're kind of distributed, and we embrace kind of daily schedules being different depending on where you are or what you're working on. So if you're working on a project in China, you might do different hours over the day. If you're based in London, for example, the studio here in London is open for people to come and use, but they don't have to. And we did manage to get everybody together before Christmas for the first time in 2 years, which was really amazing, challenging, I think. It was intense. Obviously, people hadn't spent that much time with each other, and we had new team members who hadn't met anybody in person before. Yeah. And of course, the safety and security piece. So we're leaving the responsibility of how people want to work on their shoulders, so long as we feel that they're delivering to the best of their abilities and they're continuing to learn, and that they feel part of the organization. Then we're not precious about how they work or where they work.
I get a genuine sense of kindness out of everything you've been talking about there, in terms of your approach to your team and recognizing what their needs are, and recognizing that, as you say, the culture's in the work. So the work's got to be good, but we're going to create the environment, the setup that allows you to be the best you can be to fulfill your potential.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And we think a lot about the value of our business being in both the output and the way in which we run it. And an often used phrase here is create the conditions for the best problem solvers in the world to do their best work. And so the conditions for them to do that is really, really important, whatever it may be it learning opportunities, be it exposure to new things, be it trust in each other, be it the challenges we give them. So yeah, I really believe that the care that you take for your people can only lead to them being better at what they do and further succeeding.
And so coming sort of up to date and now looking maybe a bit to the future, I love to sort of finish this way. What's next for B&A?
I think I was alluding to it a little bit earlier in terms of this idea of problem solving becoming a kind of category, if you like. I think that's really what we're out to do in the next few years. And so rather than B&A be a kind of consultancy business and only a consultancy business, we see it as a kind of ecosystem and one that you could engage with in many different ways. So we're just beta testing an education program to teach people how to be problem solvers. We built a data analysis platform called Noboa, which enables people to do quantitative data analysis very easily, and it's kind of quant for qualitative people, if you like. And we're really excited to have just kind of brought on board our first brand and comms team to start telling stories of the work we do and the people we meet along the way, and kind of build again this like brand around problem solving. So the next few years is really about building out that ecosystem and these jigsaw puzzle pieces coming together to create, I'll put it boldly, a kind of world of B&A rather than us only be a kind of consultancy business. So I think that's the opportunity. That's the exciting future. With a consultancy engine at our core, which is our bread and butter, and will continue to be so, indefinitely. So yeah, it's
exciting times.
There's a lot happening.
What's happening? And so Ben, and thank you for your time today. Just, it's a really illuminating conversation and a view on that founder mojo and just where you need to be to create this, the world of B&A as you're talking about. Just to close, are there any habits that you personally have kind of every day that I need to do these things to keep that mojo ideally 8 and upwards?
Make my bed. always, without fail. I always make my bed. I went to boarding school, maybe that's why. But yeah, I do actually. I try to do a couple of things. One is just take a few moments in the morning to like center myself before everything kicks off. I have a 6-year-old daughter, so it's pretty hectic in the morning. But just taking a moment to center, so that's helpful. I do make my bed. I feel like it's a good intention of like I'm going to get on with my day, and the day has started. And regular exercise as well, as much as possible. So getting out, getting fresh air, and exercising really helps, I think. So those are probably the most basic ones, and a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, there you go. 4 great ways to start the day. And I think there is a whole book about making your bed.
Really?
I think it's maybe a kind of an American ex-Marine who's written a business book with lots of analogies about the importance of making one's bed.
Really?
I'll see if I can find it, but it comes to mind.
When I was taught to be a journalist, doing my masters, that we had to read, we were encouraged to read the newspaper a lot. And I got into the habit of basically on my way to work, stopping at a coffee shop, getting the newspaper, because there was no iPhone thing then, and just drinking a cup of coffee and reading the paper. And it was the best start to the day. It's like you felt abreast of everything, informed, you had this moment to yourself. And so whilst I don't do that as much anymore, there are other things I think that same principle.
Yeah. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining the Mojo podcast today. As I say, really illuminating and generous conversation, because you've just shared so much about what is laid behind the success of B&A now and obviously into the future. So thank you so much, Ben.
Not at all. Thank you for having me. Great to chat.
What a cracking conversation that was. Thank you, Ben. And I'm very happy to see a fellow Leeds University graduate doing so well. So much to take out from that chat. I love Ben's observation about launching into the white space that was available to him and Andrew that they'd noticed that wasn't being covered off, which you might think in the consultancy world isn't possible as there's so many powerful players. But their experience told them there was an area to work in and exploit. And their combination of methodology and mindset, I absolutely love this, and I think it's entirely applicable to any sector. And of course, this mindset element takes up the time and commitment, but that's where the rewards are, really thinking how you want your team, your people to be. And at the core of B&A is a burning desire to change the way we look at problems and how we solve them, leading to Ben's higher purpose as he talks to. And that book, by the way, about making your bed, yes, it exists. It's actually called Make Your Bed by ex-Navy SEAL William H. McRaven. So go and have a look at that one if you're interested. Okay, I really hope you liked today's conversation. As I say, many more coming every fortnight on the Mojo Podcast. Some great founders lined up. Please do remember to rate and review, and I'll see you here in 2 weeks' time for more Mojo stories. Until then, I hope your mojo continues to flow.